indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
So they did come up with that.
Do we know if Chris is coming this evening? I don't
Chris is not.
He's not.
Fragmites study.
You want to start with that?
If you want. Sure. You could do this first.
Okay, we're going to start with the presentation to Sid Fight. Susan, if you could.
Sure. Sid, if you could.
Come on up, Sid.
No, right there is good. Yeah, you can see.
So, Sid, in recognition of all your years as a head of our boat operations and all you have done for the community and how much it means to maintain our waterways and what a benefit it is to have this program and have, somebody like you on this for so many years. I just wanted to give you this little certificate of appreciation, how much it meant to us and the community. It's a really valuable service that the trustees provide in Lake Montauk and Fremont Harbor in keeping our waterways clean. And thank you.
We miss you.
Susan,
Not as much as their job misses you.
You want me to read it?
Yes.
Yeah, go with the microphone.
In front of, in the
Nice show,
mic,
the
the
mic.
mic. And then Sid, go
Go
right
on,
up to
Sid.
the lectern.
So the certificate of appreciation reads, whereas Sid Bai has been serving our community as captain of the town trustee pump out boat in Lake Montauk, and whereas Sid's competence in implementing the pump out boat program on behalf of the trustees has resulted in tens of thousands of gallons of boat waste being prevented from entering our waterways, and whereas his contribution to the management and improvement of water quality has been invaluable, and whereas it is Sid's entertaining personality and unwavering professionalism that has furthered the success of the Pump Out Boat program, and whereas Sid has unerringly represented the Board of Trustees in an exceptional manner throughout his many years of employment, and whereas the Board of Trustees of the freeholders and commonality of the town of East Hampton wish to honor Sid Bai on the occasion of his retirement as the Pump Out Boat captain. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby honor Sid Bai for his exemplary service, his indelible impact on the town, and the quality of its waters, and his faithful contribution to the community of East Hampton. Presented this 23rd day of September 2019.
Okay. Thank you
Thank you.
very much. Thank you.
Okay, Scott DeBriner.
Good evening. My name is Scott D'Obriner. I work at InterScience Research Associates in Southampton. My official title is Senior Environmental Planner and Landscape Architect. I'm here tonight to represent Sasha Bickoff, the owner at 335 Kings Point Road. I'm also here tonight with Eric Brown from Ackerman, Packman, O'Brien, and Brown, who is the attorney for the applicant. I'm going to be very brief on this. We are proposing a bluff restoration. Show you where the site is. You good? Yeah, I think we're fine. So we are right up there, obviously. And to the next level. More accurately shows you where the project's site. The interesting about this air photo, and one of the reasons why I'm showing it to you, is that everything to the east is hardened. Our client's property isn't, and nothing to the west is hardened either. That's why we're proposing a bluff restoration, because our client's property gets hit pretty hard. In fact, in 1996, when the site was owned by someone else, there was actually an application at the ZBA for a revetment, and that application was denied. If you were to project this line of hardening structures to the toe of our client's property, it's about 40 feet. So the recession is fairly significant. Now, what I'll do is there's 7 components to the bluff restoration. I'm going to go quickly, but it's important to describe to you what those 7 components are. Actually, that is just another perspective of the top of the bluff looking to the east. Had them all lined out in the right. There we go. All right. There we go. If you can see, this is a brick landing, which is right at the top of our applicant's Bluff stairway. That is component 1 of the proposal. We're proposing to remove it entirely. The patio is 19 by 13. It will be entirely removed. All the timber terracing will be removed as well. In its place, we're planting beach grass, with the exception of a 4-foot wide grass path that will get you to the stairway, which is there. The stairway, which was built many years ago. It was built with treated wood. It does not conform dimensionally to bluff stairways that are typically approved today. The proposed stairway that's going back will more conform to the specifications that are commonly approved. An interesting aside, when we first started on this project, we tasked Drew Bennett to provide us with a conforming bluff stairway design. And that's what we got. We were both surprised when we got it. It started at the top, but then it did several switchbacks back and forth. It about doubled the length of the stairway. So when Eric and I got it, we thought it would be a hard structure to propose and get approved. So we actually took we then tasked Drew Bennett to design a more conforming, but not entirely conforming bluff stairway, which basically is a straight shot down, which is the proposal that you have before you. Before we even got to that, we took both plans to Brian Frank, correct? And showed him which one would you like more, and he picked the one that was the straight shot, which is what we have currently proposed. Which basically, it's the same location. It starts here, ends here. We don't have the landing. And it's going to be built with non-treated material. All the timber terracing that you see also will be removed. Basically, all the structure with the exception of the stairway itself. Okay. There's a lot of debris on this bluff. Some of it is from the previous owner who was simply throwing debris off the top. Some of it is also just accumulated debris that's been washed up on the bluff. All the debris is going to be removed. When you remove that debris, there's going to be unvegetated sand basically underneath. Everything that's unvegetated after the debris is removed is going to be planted with beach grass. Also, at the top of the bluff, there's actually a cantilevered grassy ledge. If you get too close, it actually becomes kind of a trap door and you fall over, which is one of the reasons why there's fencing up there. The proposal involves cutting that grass ledge off, basically for safety reasons. In addition to removing the debris, there's about 4 species of, woody plants on the bluff. It's not many at all. When we have done bluff restorations in the past, when you have a woody plant that grows tall, in storm conditions, that woody plant goes back and forth, and the root system tends to break apart the underlying soil. So what we've done in the past, we don't get rid of that woody plant. We simply cut it 6 inches off grade. It sprouts. The roots stay in place. All the root balls stay in place. It makes for a more stable bluff face. So what I've done is on site, I flagged the woody plants. That's basically it. And that is proposed to be cut at grade. So let's go back to board 4. So the fourth component of our restoration is the placement of 3 12-inch diameter coconut logs at the toe of the bluff. Only a minimum amount of excavation will be needed to set those logs in place. It'll all be done by hand, and it will replicate the profile of the existing bluff. Those 3 logs come to a footprint of approximately 5 feet by 190. And the entire stretch of the bluff we're almost at one property line here, all the way to about there. Basically, that's the toe. It'll be right at the toe. We're not trying to reclaim any property that we've lost. Those logs will simply go at the toe. In fact, what I have here is the actual plan itself. Dark green is the approximate footprint of where those coconut logs would be. As I said, minimum excavation. The only reason we're having any excavation at all is we don't want it to be a bump on the bluff face. We'll excavate to replicate the angle of the bluff, and then we're proposing to place, at a minimum, 1 foot of sand cover over those coconut logs and replant them. I have calculated that the 5 by 190 footprint would come to approximately 85 cubic yards of fill. After the fill is placed, that entire filled area would be revegetated with beach grass 12 inches on center. The final...
I believe there's a question.
Yes. You're proposing 190 feet by 3 rows across.
Yes.
How many rows deep?
No, it's three logs.
So 1 row
Actually,
deep.
I'll show you. There's a cross section. That's a log, that's a log, that's a log. That's about 5 feet, and then 190 is
So
the...
5 feet across like that.
Yeah,
And there.
yeah, I mean, that's
Right. Okay. There we
roughly
go.
5 feet.
Got it. Thank you.
The last component of our proposal is dune fencing at the new tow. We have applications in at the East Hampton ZBA. We've asked that the application be reviewed administratively. We haven't heard any comment back yet. We have an application in at the DEC, and they haven't really provided any substantive comment at this time. That's it. I met both Susans and Bill at the site about a week and a half ago, along with Eric.
And I took extra pictures as well, and you did a very detailed description of the project as you have done tonight. Also, I took pictures of the next-door neighbors, so it would be very similar and conforming with the neighbors to the south.
Southwest.
Yes, that's right.
What is it that we actually need to permit, since we don't own the bluff?
Anyway,
We own the beach. Just the tow.
So,
So
Where the
this
this tow and where the stairs land.
we have the
And the-
logs,
and the fencing?
logs,
fence,
the
and the
fence, and the
staircase.
staircase ending,
Staircase.
basically.
You can actually plant right into the log. I've seen that done before.
And possibly.
Yeah, I saw a little green in your illustration, and you had described that when we were there, that the plants could actually be held in the logs.
You know, looking at the whole thing on a site visit, this looks like a, very well thought out and designed process. Looks like you could even be a little bigger, but we're not gonna fight with you.
So what is going to be planted in the, I think it's orange area behind the core logs? Because right now there, you had pointed out there is a little woody vegetation there.
Well,
That area there.
in this area, that's,
That's this area here now, correct?
yeah.
Right. You're gonna leave it alone?
Absolutely, like.
Yeah, it looks
even if
pretty healthy.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing we're gonna be taking, it's not going to be a native vegetated bluff. We're not gonna take out anything that's alive and existing. We're gonna take the debris out, and the void that the debris leaves, we'll plant it up. But we're not going to
What are you going to?
remove the non-natives and plant natives.
What are you going to be planting in those
Pardon?
voids?
In the void, Scott, what are we gonna be playing?
Oh, beach grass.
Beach grass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Directly into the bare soil, or will it be like a jute mat or anything like that, laid over the bare soil, in which the beach grass is then planted, or will it just be planted directly?
Can't hear you, I'm sorry. The beach grass is gonna be at least 12 inches on center. We'll, depending on the time of year we're doing it, we may not even need irrigation. If it's done,
Scott, I think his question is, correct me if I'm wrong, when we take this stuff out, it's gonna leave a void.
absolutely.
Into which we're going to eventually plant beach grass.
Uh-huh.
I think he wonders what medium is gonna be, is there gonna be sand there, or what's gonna be in that once you take this out?
Jute mat,
We're just gonna go
sand.
right into.
We're not proposing to replace any top soil, whatever is there. I'm assuming it's going to be mostly sand. We're gonna plant right into that.
And if I remember correctly, it's 85 yards of sand that's going to be brought in, is that correct? Or am I-
Say that again?
85 yards.
85 yards of
85
sand?
yards, that's the calculated amount for the tow, the sand that's gonna be placed over the coconut log itself.
Right.
and then this fencing along that top of that
Yeah, that's
bluff
gonna be
where that's going to
removed.
be cut out is going
That's
to be
gonna be
removed
removed.
as well.
Yeah, that edge is very precarious, where the brick patio is, you have to be careful, you step the
Absolutely.
wrong way and it falls off, and you go with it.
Is there any grading necessary when you cut that overhanging lawn back? Is there any grading that'll be necessary?
I don't
to
think so. I don't think, it's,
establish
it,
it?
12 to 18 inches overhang, I think it's gonna be cut really quite easily. They're gonna be working on this bluff. Men are gonna be going up and down. it's going to assume a natural angle of repose. We're not going to propose any regrading with equipment or anything like that. It's pretty much at the natural angle of repose now, about 45 degrees.
I thought it was a very well thought out plan. I thought it was conformed to the neighborhood and certainly not putting in any hard revetment of any kind or rocks, or, you know, that kind of thing. This is a very much more natural approach to preserving and protecting the bluff as well as the homeowner's property.
What is your timeline for
Well,
getting started?
We're thinking this spring.
Spring, if we can do it.
We're already basically into October. I don't foresee us getting all of our approvals before we lose our fall planting window. So we just discussed this. I think it's going to be March. So there's really not too many components of this proposal that can go seriously wrong.
And of course, now that we've said that, we'll get hit by an asteroid or something. The board should also be aware there was an upland application for the house and the upland portion that's made its way through the NRSP and Bluff Crest variance process. That's been approved. When Scott talked about that little brick patio, that was something that the ZBA addressed, and we had said initially, the client doesn't want it, we're going to take it out. And as I think the trustees who have been to the site have seen, there's a pretty extensive revegetation between the house and the edge of the block.
Yes,
And that was also required by
relatively
the
new
ZBA.
plantings.
Yes,
right?
correct, yes.
Very natural
We had to equalize the
abundance.
clearing and the vegetation before we can even pull a building permit. So all that stuff is,
That was very nicely done.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with it other than to say it sounds great to have plants there, so.
In the renovation, is the homeowner going to replace the septic?
Yes, and it's going to be it'll be the
The new?
new,
It's an IA system.
IA system
on the
on the-
cement side of the house.
right. The existing system is on the Bluff side. That's just going to be abandoned, filled with sand, and then they're going to put a new system on the Bluff, on the road side of the.
Roadside.
The right side of the house, yes.
Do you know when they anticipate the renovation of the house? Because right now it's a very modest house. It's
Yeah, and it's going to, the
And it will stay,
footprint, the footprint will stay. It's basically the same house. It will be a little bit taller, and they're going to put a basement underneath
Right.
it. But it will be, the footprint is basically the same. We're waiting now for Health Department because we need to hook up one of the neighbors across the street to public water, because when we relocate the sanitary system, it conflicts with her well. So we're doing that, and that's really the only precondition that needs to be addressed before we can pull a building permit, so.
Okay. Well, do we want to wait and table this decision, or do we want to approve it based on zoning board and DEC approvals? Any suggestions or thoughts on this?
This one looks good to go to me, I mean, but
When do you expect ZBA to hear?
We haven't even
heard
heard
it?
from the ZBA yet. You know, it would be nice to, we talked about this earlier, it would be nice if you voted, and then we could tell the ZBA, we already have blessing from the trustees, and I would certainly say the same to the DEC, in hopes that it pushes them in the same direction.
It sounds like a really good project. I'm just hearing about it for the first time. I would just appreciate 2 weeks to get a chance to just go take a look at it. You know, I think
that's fair.
there's time, but I don't disagree with encouraging a healthy, positive project like this, but I would just appreciate one meeting cycle. to
I
take
think that's a
look.
prudent thing to do when we have the paperwork and you can look at
And
the
then we
plans more
can
carefully.
get behind this, you know, and
And that's fine, just go,
raise a good project.
whenever you want to go out, just go out. She's not out there, it's not a high-security
And I'll do a-
environment at all.
Okay, Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
Rick.
all right.
Hey,
John,
guys, I do want
go
to
with
point
Rick?
out, I won't be voting on
Go
this
by
when I'm
yourself.
involved in the project.
Okay.
Sorry?
I just want to let everybody know I won't be voting or commenting on this. I'm involved in the project, so I'll be recusing myself.
Okay.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll table it for next
Okay.
Next meeting?
next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, October 18th. Is it October 18th? Okay, so our next meeting is October 18th.
Yeah,
3 weeks, because we have Columbus Day.
Right.
Just so you know, October
just
18th.
But it's a Friday of that.
There's no rush on this, but I mean,
we have to discuss that later tonight.
yeah, I think,
Kind of like,
I think,
check all the boxes.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, next is Carol Buda.
are the,
To the podium, please. And please introduce yourself.
Hi, Carol Buda. Last January, when I was on the Wildlife Committee, I we submitted a proposal to town board for the one-day ban on hunting, and it's now in its sort of second generation. But one of the things that I wasn't aware of when I made that proposal was that the waterfowl hunting falls under the jurisdiction of the trustees, I was told.
Well, the trustees administer duck blind
Right.
permits. We don't administer the issuance of New York State hunting
No,
licenses.
that I understand, but I think,
Matt, you and I had spoken about that.
right, but I was then, someone else told me that it's in the Dongan Patent, that the trustees have jurisdiction over waterfowl shooting.
We support public access for hunting as per our charter, the Dongan Patent.
Okay, so I'm a little confused, because as far as the town board's concerned, they say the waterfowl hunting as to, falls under your jurisdiction.
For
So,
issuance of duck
Okay.
blinds to provide
So-
safe sites for people to go hunting.
well, let me,
We do not regulate the days of the week that hunters hunt, because otherwise we'd be in a very confusing situation with the Department of Environmental Conservation, who we basically follow their rules.
okay, so this is why I'm here tonight, and this is why we have a second-generation proposal with the town, because after, for example, with the big game gun hunting, when, which that ban was, the weekend ban was in place since at least going back to 1950. When they lifted the ban 5 or 6 years ago, the Suffolk County State Park Department decided to keep the ban in place in Montauk State Park and Hither Hills, for user group
Well,
access.
Hither Hills is a state park.
I understand, but in other words, the fact that the ban was lifted didn't prevent the state park and from
Ma'am,
from regulating
Ma'am, I-
when that could go
I
on.
believe the state park has kept the hunting in place.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I believe the state park has kept the hunting in place on the weekends.
No, they have.
They have not?
It's on the DEC website, I had all that information. I've spoken to the park rangers, I've spoken to the Suffolk
Is that
County
for
State
all
Park, and I've
parks or
spoken to
for
the
selected
DEC.
parks?
No, each region sets its own rules. And what I was told by the DEC, Suffolk County DEC, and by the Suffolk County State Park was the decision to retain the weekend ban on the big game hunting in those two parks was for quote-unquote overall safety, and so that more user groups would have safe access to public land. So if I could just make my case, and then obviously, you're going to discuss it and do whatever it is that you want. So the DEC in their September newsletter had a reference to waterfowl hunting. I'd like to read, and you can pass this around. I brought another couple extra copies. And they said, the DEC, this is this month's newsletter, reminds hunters to follow simple safety guidelines and use good judgment when choosing a time and place to hunt. Considering other people who enjoy the outdoors or live nearby can help avoid potential conflicts and ensure a safe and enjoyable season. As coastal areas become more populated, it is important for new landowners to receive a good impression of the safety, ethics, and traditions of waterfowl hunting. A little courtesy and time spent before a hunt can go a long way to avoid or minimize conflicts with property owners and other outdoor enthusiasts. DEC encourages hunters to consider contacting owners of property adjacent to where they will be hunting well in advance. Tell property owners when and where you will be hunting. I want to raise a couple of issues here. And I think there are a couple of ways that it could be addressed if you chose to do it. When I submitted the first proposal, in no way was it meant to be an attack on hunting. It was really an attempt to restore a little bit of the safe access that those of us who use the woods had before the ban was lifted. And so the gun noise, the waterfowl hunting affects several groups of people. And a lot of it I live near 3 Mile Harbor, a few blocks away. I live right next door, across the street from Bill, actually. And we hear it. And it can start a half an hour before dawn and go until dusk, I guess. And that's 7 days a week. Now, the town regulates construction noise, they regulate music noise, and that's 7 days a week. We were just asking for some relief, 1 day a week. Or another option would be to just make certain areas off limits. So, for example, a heavily populated area like 3 Mile Harbor, if that were restricted, there are many, many other places that are less populated, like Napeague or Northwest Harbor, where people could, have 7-day-a-week waterfowl hunting. So I think there are, my proposal was just one way to approach it. We're open to lots of things. I want to just raise a couple of issues about the kinds of people it affects. First of all, I know my daughter gets awakened by it. There are people who are awakened by it. I don't hear so well anymore, so that's not an issue for me. We have 3 dogs in our household. One of them is terrified of gun noise, not thunder, but gun noise. I'm not the only person with this problem. I wouldn't come here if I was. And so if a gun goes off, she bolts, and sometimes into dangerous situations. And, the CDC, I looked it up today, they say that nearly 1/3 of Americans suffer from sleep deprivation. Now, it may sound silly, but it's not silly, because it's associated with the root causes of decreased productivity, accidents, and for many people, if they get awakened at 5:30 in the morning, they can't get back to sleep. So, and if you had, a dog like mine, for example, sometimes we drive all the way over to Sammy's Beach with 10, 15-minute drive, and we get there and someone's shooting, and we have to leave. It's like, we don't know we could go to this place, or we could go to that place, because we might drive over to Barnes Landing and they're shooting there. Even in the dog park, we're affected by it, because we're so close to harbor. So I'm just hoping that you would at least, discuss this, because I think, I've been coming out here since the 70s, living out here full-time, like the last 20 years, and this town has become suburbanized, and they've built houses everywhere, and you now have hundreds and hundreds of houses around 3 Mile Harbor. So many, many people are affected by it. It's not an anti-hunting thing, it's just a quality of life issue, because the sound carries over the water, and it's not a low-impact activity like clamming or other things that we do. So I'm hoping that you would think about it. So the fact that the DEC and the state parks acknowledge that even though things are allowed, different regions and private property, they have the option to regulate it, do have the option to regulate it. And they acknowledge in their newsletter that it's a problem, it's a conflict, because people are disturbed by it, for a variety of reasons. Look, I know people who just, hear shooting and they just get upset, and it's an emotional issue. And I mean, again, you may think it's silly, but for those people, it's a serious issue. So I think that I would hope that at least something you would discuss. Can I comment for a minute on the presentation that was here on the beach, the Bluff replenishment?
Oh, the one that just was presented tonight.
Yeah, because I'm very familiar with that beach. I used to walk there with my dogs. And at high tide, I know they're talking about the Bluff, but below the Bluff, at high tide, there's no beach there, because there have been bulkheads put there. And even at low tide, there are broken down wood jetties that go out perpendicular to the beach. So if you want to walk at low tide, you have to climb over them or under them. There are also on the, where people built they replaced the bulkhead, there are sharp things sticking out of them. I no longer walk my dogs there because I'm afraid that they're going to poke an eye out. But, and I'd spoken about Bill Taylor about this further down the beach near Albert's Landing where you have sharp things sticking out. It's a beach next door to where people go with their kids.
That was
And
the,
that's high
that
level
was
for
the,
children.
that was removed, that one section. The one section down there was actually removed.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, the one section that was the most problematic was the one that the town removed this spring. So
Are you
can actually-
talking about near this property or by
No, I
Albert's
was
Landing?
talking about down by Albert's, Little Albert's.
Yeah, they're called groins,
Groins.
and that one was removed. And if you have pictures of anything that's sticking out into the beach, we'd
Yes,
love to
I
see
will.
them.
I will, and the one sticking up. But right to the north of Albert's Landing, there are metal things that stick out of the ground about the eye level of a child. Those have not been, they weren't removed the last time I was there.
I think that's private beach.
I'm
I think
sorry, can
that
you just
beach
speak
may
in the mic,
belong
what?
to the Bell- I think that part of the beach may belong to the Bell Estate.
Actually,
No,
it's one of the
It's
property
beyond the
owners.
Bell State sign. It is,
Belongs to the Bell Estate.
Oh.
It's privately owned.
even if it's after their sign, because I know when you come down the beach from Barnes, there's a sign, you walk down through the Bell Estate, and then there's another sign, this is beyond that, this is south
I
of that.
believe, yes, down to where you're talking about, where those
Well, if-
rebars and all that.
If they're
riprap is
responsible
sticking
for
out.
it, can they be made to remove them? To hazard?
Possibly. We'll look into that.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol.
Well, do we have anything else on the public comment?
Yep.
Let's get through that.
All right. Jim Walker?
Okay, Jim Walker from InterScience. My project is not as complete as Scott's. This project is relatively new. I met with trustees out at the property briefly. This is the former Tiedemann property. I had the pleasure of working for Carl Tiedemann while I was alive, and Michael and Lee Tiedemann subsequently. This is 2 lots. It's 19 and 23 Chauncey Close. There's an existing house there that somebody purchased, and they're going to build a guest house on the vacant piece of property. The common weed management program that we have here was proposed as hand digging. The reason why it was proposed as hand digging is we've been successful doing that on a couple properties, some of which are 3 lots, some of which are single lots, one of which is around the corner in Jones Cove. It was pretty spectacularly done by Susan DeClava. There's an alternate approach that you can use in common weed management, and that would be excavation. We didn't propose excavation in this particular instance because we were mimicking another property where we had 3 lots and we did hand digging, and it was pretty spectacularly successful. But going forward, we're going to consider excavation. We don't have our hands around the cost of the project, the overall cost of the project, so the board should be aware that we may come back, meet with you again, show you a different set of boards. I really only have 1 board to show you tonight. I don't have 6 or 7 that Scott had.
Thank you.
The idea is to remove the common weed. There's purple loosestrife, there's a lot of autumn olive. There's mile-a-minute weed. This is other invasive, non-native vegetation that we see in addition to common weed. All around Georgia, all around many of the estuaries, all around many freshwater wetlands in the eastern end of Long Island. The requirement is that we plant back a 125-foot setback for the wetlands buffer. The vegetation that we call out for is typical vegetation that we use in this type of project. It includes wetland species, Scott come all the way over here. Wetland species in all these areas. Shrubs, seeded wetlands, narrowleaf cattail, a wide variety of vegetation in the wetlands proper. And then there's a buffer area that's here, and that's going to be a switchgrass meadow. Then there's a second, more upland area that's going to be a little blue stem meadow. And those plant species are all spelled out for you. That's the application that you have in front of you. Largely, the upland plantings, which the trustees may or may not really be interested in, are a little bit out of your jurisdiction, but I know the trustees generally support planting a lot of native plants. There they are. There's a bunch of autumn olive in here. To the extent that we remove autumn olive in those areas, that will make the black cherry and the eastern red cedar do all that much better. So we have to consider, since we met with the trustees and we have started the process of dealing with New York State DEC and have submitted an application to the Village Zoning Board of Appeals, we're starting to get feedback. So when we get enough feedback and we have an idea what the cost implications are, we'll be coming back to the trustees with a more defined design narrative and specifications for the overall project. The idea is to get rid of the common reed and end up having a shoreline that has narrow leaf cattail, soft rush, blue flag iris, marshmallow, switchgrass, little blue stem. These are projects that have more recently been easier to understand, more reliable in outcome. And when I started doing these types of projects, they were very difficult, and it was really awful to be the person that had to go get the permits to deal with it. But we learned a lot over the years. We're still learning a lot. Putting together projects like this is pretty enjoyable and pretty rewarding. That's the type of program that we're expecting here.
So Jim, right now you're proposing, in theory, mechanical excavation followed by restoration with planting.
We may very well do mechanical excavation with sand put back, biologs, similar to what Scott just proposed. Plant out the plant material along the shoreline in the high marsh here, and in the, this is a coastal fresh marsh, in those areas. The other nice thing about the idea of excavation is that if we bring a long-reach excavator here, we can pull the material out of the opening to Georgica Creek so that the water exchange is better than what it is now.
Georgica Cove.
Georgica Cove. Almost got it right.
Okay.
You can take out a couple of those old duck blinds that are stuck up in that reed there.
Oh, by the way, I support duck blinds. My son's a duck hunter, and I thoroughly enjoy hunting in Hither Woods. Duck hunting is a truly gentleman's sport, and I'm glad my 15-year-old likes to go out there and hunt.
Okay, if I can make I'd love to comment on this. I'm very familiar with this property. I actually worked with Jim for the Tiedemann family many years ago on this property. History of this land was, it was part of the Chauncey Farm. Okay, the property was subdivided, I think in the late 70s, okay? And the history of this land was, it was kind of a gentleman's farm in the sense that there was some tilled land, there was some orchard areas, there were...
It was dairy at one point.
Dairy,
Yeah.
okay? This was grazing land, okay? And it was managed as such until the time when they made this into a subdivision. And when the subdivision was first done, this was like beautiful sort of successional field. It was put into scenic easement. There's a scenic easement that runs the whole perimeter of this subdivision, which unfortunately most of the homeowners have violated to one degree or another over the years. But there was a downside to that, the simple fact that that lack of mowing, the lack of grazing, allowed a lot of these non-native invasive woody plants to move into these properties. And this property has, as Jim described, it's got the autumn olive, it's got milum in it, it's got porcelain vine, it's got every invasive that's that's basically on the invasives list. And the reason Jim is actually contemplating an excavation rather than hand excavation is, honestly, the amount of invasives kind of outnumbers any of the native component here. And the one thing that an excavation project would do with a property like this is get basically 100% immediate control over those invasives and the ability to put it back naturally, immediately. A cutting hand removal routine, you're talking about doing the planting component 3 or as late as 5 years down the road from the time that you first start cutting it. And if you see this property, it is so inundated with Phragmites. For example, that little freshwater pond area, that when I was a kid, that was a pond that we would go and shoot puddle duck and stuff on. I'm not sure if after you get done cutting, doing the hand cutting on this Phragmites, I don't think there's a pond there anymore. I think the biomass of that Phragmites has so elevated the grade there, the pond no longer exists. And it's too bad, because it was a great little body. It actually, I think, was very productive to the surrounding area. I do make the comment that what they're proposing here in terms of the vegetated buffer along the shoreline, the tall grass prairie area, the short grass prairie areas are going to give you a degree of buffer that we don't see on any projects that come before us. I mean, usually you have an applicant that comes to the table kicking and screaming about every inch of buffer that's being proposed. This is one that's walking in the door with not, I'd say, more than a significant buffer to this thing. I think it's going to enhance the overall impact of the landscape immeasurably. But here we've got one that, if you look at that, it looks like a state park, the amount of open space that's being left here, and I want to commend you on it. I think this is great.
Yeah, it's a really nice project, and I'd have to agree with Jim in some aspects of the hand excavations that we've seen. The natural recruitment hasn't been something that we really saw the success that we hoped for. And some of those native species have a hard time reestablishing in the stubble patches that are left with the hand cutting.
Yeah. And the one thing that you do have on a property like this,
pull it off.
sometimes that mechanical excavation is challenged by access. This is a property that has a unique aspect in that has total access right now on the vacant property to get into this land, to do a haul road that's not going to be very impactful to the property at all, and get the material out. You don't often get those opportunities.
If invasives took over once, what's to prevent them from taking over again?
Well, I think a management plan that allows reentry to the areas and allows management of those invasive plants. I mean, what happened on this property is Mr. Tiedemann mowed this property on an annual basis from the time that he owned it, because prior to that they were grazing cattle on it. He was one of the first property owners here, and before he even built his house, he was mowing this property and maintained it as that. In his declining years, nothing was done on this property for a period of about 10, 12 years. And what you're seeing there is the consequence to that.
Is there a management plan to go into the future, or?
Usually with carbon reed projects like this, what we see, say it's only selective cutting, which we do a lot of. Usually it's a 3-year program, and then we apply for a new 3-year permit. And as far out as 6 years, you're still weeding out the Phragmites, the Japanese knotweed, the mile-a-minute weed, the things that come up. So with hand digging, it's a little less so. But with all projects like this, even if we go in there with a long-reach excavator, we take out the whole set of rhizomes, and we have put back sand, and we have biologs, and the whole 9 yards, there's still a fair amount of management, at least for a period of a couple more years. That's why we have the little paths proposed around here. These are maintenance paths. This is how you get in and out with a crew. Actually, the cost of the management goes down dramatically each year, and if we do it in the way that was recommended, and we do it with a long-reach excavator, the maintenance costs are much less. Selective cutting, we have lower upfront costs, but we have a longer maintenance cost. So with long-reach excavator, we have an initial cost that's much higher, and we have much less in terms of maintenance costs. They kind of weigh against each other, but there's maintenance involved with each of them. And if there's no maintenance and nobody's interested in the project, it will fail miserably. It has to have follow-up, or it's a project that I don't want to be involved with.
This seems like once it's too far gone, the only option you have is to clean it off, start over. You're gonna replant it with native vegetation, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
How many acres in total are these two lots?
It's 3.5, 3.5. It's more or less 7 acres. I wrote it down somewhere.
Okay.
I have a hard time.
It's approximate, it's fine. It's beautiful.
3.522 and 3.629.
But your ultimate goal is like 5 or 6 years from now to have this place mostly native vegetation.
Native wetlands vegetation along the shoreline. Tall grass prairie is the first part of the upland, and short grass prairie is the second. Switchgrass and little bluestem are prairie clump grasses, and they do very well. They're reliable. They're easy to mix in with other plants, so you can have a nice, attractive meadow that people are able to really enjoy and appreciate.
In meadows like those, is cutting a preferred way to maintain them as they've been planted, or is that?
Preferred way, maintain them, we burn them every 3 years, but I'm pretty sure nobody's gonna go along with that here.
Short of burning and mowing?
I think mowing's gonna be the
Both lower around the question, right?
Selective burning is a real ecological management tool, but probably here we would only be weeding, hand cutting, especially if we're permitted and we go through the process of using long-reach excavator, the more expensive approach.
Jim, thanks.
Any more questions?
At the moment, thank you so very much. It looks like a beautiful property.
Jim, what's your timetable? Are you looking for spring or
We like to get these approved for the first cut in January.
January?
So we'll see how that goes. Traditionally, what happens when we have a trustees project that's coupled with a village project, we start to get feedback from Billy Hajak. Billy Hajak gives feedback to the property owner, and we come back to the trustees with something that's a little more finished. Here, we're presenting a project that's still in its initial stages, but now you've seen it, and Billy Hajak will weigh in, and Freshwater Wetlands Technical Unit and the Bureau of Habitat at DEC will both weigh in. That's a coastal fresh marsh and a high marsh.
Jim, what is the footage of the waterfront? Do you know?
It got me. I'm not certain.
I'll go look it up on a tax map.
Quite a bit.
It looks beautiful. That's, I'm
Maybe
asking,
Arlene
yeah, I
will lend
can
you a
see.
survey.
Okay.
We submitted surveys.
Okay.
You called my bluff. That's one I didn't think of. Sorry.
That's all right. I'll find out.
We can give it to you next time. I can write.
No, I'll find out. It's okay.
The linear fee is on the meets and bounds for the survey, so you have it, but offhand, it's considerable.
Yes, I see that. It's lovely.
It's a big shoreline, it's long. If the Board of Trustees and the village and the DEC all issued approvals and the property owner carried through, I'm pretty certain that it would be a project the trustees would be happy they were associated with.
Can you just read off the scale, what to the inch there, up there? It's about 2 feet.
I have to take my glasses off to read. 1 inch equals 30.
30, so it's about
30 scale.
24, 26 inches, 28 inches, 30 inches, 24 to 30 inches, times 30 feet.
Okay, thank you.
What is that, like
Did you get my,
700 and something?
750 or so.
okay.
I think it's all at 700 or 800 feet. It's a pretty long shoreline. It is not the longest shoreline that I've done. We did 750 feet at Robert Niederlander's with hand digging, and it works spectacularly. And we did 3 lots in the village of Southampton. Not certain exactly what the shoreline length was, but we've done projects that were this big or bigger, and the end result can be really something neat to see.
Is that Niederlander over in Southampton?
Robert Niederlander owned a property on Jones Cove directly across
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Danny Ackerman's property. I don't recall the exact street address, but Robert Niederlander's part owner of the Yankees, and I think he sold his property. More recently, he's got to be getting on in years at this point.
Yeah. I remember the project. I remember the, way back in the day.
That was a good one. I was really happy it came out nice. He was a really pleasant person to work with.
That was one of the first Fragmite projects.
It was a while ago at this point. I don't remember all of them, when I did them, but that was a fun one. I really enjoyed that one.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
All right, Mark Mendelman?
Good evening. Mark Mendelman, 14 Gann Road. I don't want to take too much of your time tonight. I just wanted to read a letter that I sent on September 17th. Hopefully everyone's received it. And it goes like this. Dear East Hampton Town Trustees, I've watched the video of the August 26th, 2019 meeting where you and I spoke about the hatchery plan for Gann Road a few times now, and I'm shocked at a few things that were said, and I have some questions and comments as a result. Mr. Bach, you said the trustees hadn't heard about the hatchery plan. You were getting the first presentation about it that night. And how did the Aquaculture Committee send a letter of support to the grant administrator? Isn't there supposed to be a motion to approve a letter of support from a trustee committee? That's parliamentary procedures of the trustees that I'm not familiar with. Number 2, Mr. Bach and Ms. McGraw-Keeber, you need to understand that the reason we have zoning laws is to protect property owners. Ms. McGraw-Keeber, you said you live near the airport. Presumably the airport was there when you bought your house, and your property was valued accordingly. If there was an airport expansion proposed, you and the rest of the public would get to say something to the planning board at a public hearing, and the property would be noticed for all to see. That is the permitting process, and the town is not following it, and you are supporting them. Why should the town not be following its own rules to protect property rights? It is the job of the planning board to review permit applications against standards contained in the zoning code, which the planning board is responsible for upholding. Those standards were enclosed with a letter. Mr. Bach, number 3, Mr. Bach, you said we all have something, that you have a solar farm next to you. If you don't like living next to a solar farm, did you get to say something about it during the permitting of it? Would you have liked to? Number 4, Mr. Bach, your rationale for this being a good project was that it stops stormwater from entering the harbor. This is presumably referring to the Green Reach Infrastructure Demonstration Project, or GRID, which includes proposed stormwater runoff management actions, including bioswales. Number 1, I am not opposed to the town putting a bioswale on the property for stormwater management. I would support the town making the property one big bioswale and rain garden. Number 2, stormwater is a lower priority than septic system nitrogen to improving water quality. The GRID project includes permeable reactive barrier, PRB, injection wells, where a carbon source like vegetable oil or molasses is injected, allowing bacteria to denitrify the groundwater. It is an interesting method of cleanup, but cleanup efforts should be directed to where the water quality is poorest. Location matters. The PRB technology should be deployed around the southern end of the harbor, where flushing and water quality is poorest, and where denitrifying the groundwater entering the worst flush portion of the harbor will have a significant effect due to the high residence times of the water. The proposed project at Gann Road, however, will expend resources to clean the water going into the harbor in a place with good flushing from the bay, effectively wasting the effort of cleaning up the water in the first place, because dilution will reduce the effect of the cleaning. Number 5, I want to see improved water quality. I would like to see the town of East Hampton invest water quality improvement funds wisely and effectively in order to bring about the highest level of water quality improvements per tax dollar spent, as evidenced by reduction in frequency of harmful algal blooms, or HABs, and significant reduction in concentrations of nitrogen into groundwater, streams, and surface waters. The town of East Hampton's commitment to the 36 Gann Road Hatchery Project, with a 5,500 square foot industrial hatchery building, in addition to an education and town office building, with no special permit for the mariculture portion and going beyond the original idea of just using the house, is against the town's zoning code and is wrong. Additionally, the hatchery itself won't reduce nitrogen concentrations in groundwater entering the harbor and will have no effect on frequency of HABs, so it won't improve water quality. I am opposed to any money being spent on a new hatchery building when it will not impact water quality. I agree with PRBs in appropriate locations. I agree with bioswales as a rule of thumb for stormwater, and I agree with aquaculture and education. What I don't agree with is an industrial municipal facility being committed to by the government under the guise of water quality in a residential neighborhood without following the government's own rules first. We need to stop the septic nitrogen as a first priority. Number 6, Mr. Bach, you said you had a hard time taking me seriously because of what I have down there, as if my partial interest in a commercial enterprise on Gann Road somehow makes my opinion as a homeowner and taxpayer living on Gann Road less important. I don't understand your logic. Do I not get taken seriously because I own a house and a small portion of commercial enterprise in the area? When would I get taken seriously? When I have no interest in the area? Do all my other neighbors get taken seriously? Please elaborate on what criteria must be met in order to be taken seriously. Number 7, Trustee Rick Drew brought up Sunset Cove and how the trustees should apply the same standards across projects, and how the town's hatchery plan includes new upland construction, which Sunset Cove did not show plans for. I'd like to remind the trustees about a story in the East Hampton Star on March 28th of 2019 titled, "Oyster Farm Hits the Rocks." Here the trustees raised concerns over potential impacts ranging from environmental to access to whether it was an approved use. Mr. Bach, the East Hampton Town Code Business Use Table says a special permit is required for mariculture. Mr. Aldred, you said the town code does not mention aquaculture, but it does. Aquaculture is a change of use, requiring a special permit from the planning board and a natural resources special permit from the zoning board, and a trustee permit for the floating upweller system, or FLUPSIs. Enclosed is a copy of the town's use tables for commercial uses, which calls out mariculture on line A22. Ms. McGraw-Keeber said Sunset Cove started with a lot more of the area being used and trimmed it back. Why not encourage more commercial oysters? Why not lease the bottom land to Sunset Cove, have them buy seed from the town at market prices, and let them figure out what is the best way to grow oysters? Mr. Aldred said there could be interest in making sections of the harbor available for commercial aquaculture by baymen. If commercial growers don't get it right, they fail. And if they do get it right, they make lots of shellfish for sale. That's capitalism. Remember capitalism? Trustees should help them grow as many shellfish as possible, right? Mr. Aldred, would you support grant funding of Sunset Cove's proposed aquaculture business? Mr. Aldred also said Sunset Cove expressed interest in putting a hatchery upland, which would require them to make the application for a permit. And he wouldn't be surprised if Sunset Cove gets the same response as Gann Road is getting from the neighborhood. The town should follow the same process Sunset Cove would have to follow in order to get the permits to do the Gann Road hatchery. Mr. Aldred and I discussed the local waterfront revitalization project, which was noted in one of the letters of support for the town's grant application. Encloses a copy of Rameshwar Das's letter of support, which says, quote, "Town policy is to encourage public aquaculture that enhances stocks and to discourage large-scale private aquaculture / mariculture," end quote. Chapter 4-17. Maybe the LWRP needs to be revisited such that private aquaculture is encouraged as well. Number 8, Mr. Grimes said that the fact that the town is proposing the facility does not make it by virtue a better project, and the town should look through the same lens for their own project as they do for commercial projects. Mr. Grimes also said the town should demonstrate to the taxpayer the value of the project. I agree. Number 9, Mr. Grimes also talked about the Montauk facility and how there's stuff everywhere, and how he would hope that after spending this kind of money, we're not 5 years down the road with a place that looks bad. Given what I've experienced with the town's upkeep on properties all around town, I have the same concern. That is why the planning board needs to consider this. There are impacts to the neighborhood from operating an aquaculture facility, and visual blight is one of the many things they are charged with considering before approving a site plan. I'm sure if Sunset Cove ever submitted a site plan application for a hatchery upland, the planning board would have a lot to say before permitting it. Number 10, Ms. McGraw-Keever questioned the environmental impact of diesel-powered boats at the Marina, making outrageous claims of diesel spewing into the harbor. This is untrue, slanderous, and has nothing to do with the hatchery discussion. Frankly, it seems like a lowball attempt at character assassination, and I would only answer that by saying you astound me with your ignorance and lack of character yourself. It is poor character to allege I am doing something bad to silence my opinion and bolster your argument that this is a good project. Number 11, Ms. McGraw-Keever asked, what is the environmental impact of having no oysters? As if not doing this project would somehow halt the activities of the aquaculture department and this would cause all oysters to disappear. That is ridiculous. Number 12, Ms. McGraw-Keever, you came prepared with a support resolution at a meeting where the trustees are first hearing about it, and you just heard from the public to not do it. That sounds like you've got your mind made up already and are not willing to be open-minded about a different opinion. Number 13, Ms. McGraw-Keever and Barley talked about how shellfish filtering will improve water quality, but if an HAB occurs, the shellfish die, especially sensitive scallops. Mr. Aldred, you said it is hard to make money growing scallops because they're fragile and normal losses are higher than clams and oysters. The primary reason you said they should be grown is to kickstart a natural population, but the water quality and the benthic environment needs to be suitable for a natural population to succeed, and the way to get there is to get rid of the nitrogen from septic waste. And the place to start has already been identified by the trustees' own sampling efforts, the southern end of 3 Mile Harbor. What can the trustees do to support impactful water quality improvement projects in the southern end of 3 Mile Harbor to reduce nitrogen, prevent HABs, and restore the benthic environment to support growing shellfish? Number 14, while I haven't heard from Mr. Taylor yet, beyond his signing the letter of support for the hatchery grant application, I would like to ask Mr. Taylor to have the same access concerns he expressed about Sunset Cove back in March for boaters, fishermen, and the public that utilize Gann Road. Haven't heard the opinions of Mr. Cullum, Ms. Vorpal, or Mr. Burns yet, but I would like to. Sincerely, Mark Mendelman. And I'll just leave you with one thing that someone smarter than me said, and that is, when the law doesn't apply to the lawmakers, you're not being governed, you're being ruled. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Ira Barocas?
Good evening to you all. You all know who I am, and I sure know who you are. I live at 16 Babes Lane. I've owned that house for 20 years. I first saw it 40 years ago, waited 20 years for it to come on the market. As a result, I have 2 houses, and I'm a lucky guy. I want to second what Mark had to say. I thought that you guys were unnecessarily hostile to a friend and a neighbor. I have 3 questions for you. The first of which is, did you, in writing or at any time, grant the oyster hatchery that exists permission to store its property on the Babes Lane Preserve at the southern end, or Cliffy's Access Road? Did you put that in writing? Was there ever a vote, or they just put their stuff there?
We don't own that land.
Pardon?
We don't own that land.
However, it's a common access. I believe that under the Dongan patent, your job is to respect the commonalities, access to the water, and to deal with the bottomlands.
There is still access there. I put that gear there first back in, I don't know, 2000.
I remember, but was it as much gear
I
as?
got
as it-
permission from the town board to do that. I don't know if it was in writing.
Okay, so you had permission, and then it expanded as you,
No, I don't think it expanded. I've been
Well-
down there. It's pretty much the same.
well, it's been.
In my observation.
It's been moved, and so we're happy about that after we did. Now, you also know that there's a deeded access that comes down from Woodcrest and goes along the 36 Gann property that allows the commonalty, all of us, to access the waterfront. Did this board grant the oyster hatchery the right to have 90 paying, largely unresidential oyster growers use that waterfront to the detriment of public access?
We approved the oyster garden in that location.
You approved the oyster gardening, even though it took access away from the rest of us.
It's a shared space.
Well, it's not shared if I can't put a kayak in the water and go out without a hassle.
Without
we
putting a
did-
kayak in the water 50 feet away?
We did speak to Barley, I did personally, and asked him to make sure that there was a clear access for kayaking, paddleboarding, small sailboats, and swimming.
And that did happen
He
after
assured me.
after we raised the issue, and I also had a conversation with Barley, and I'm pleased about that on behalf of my neighbors. You know, as president of the Duck Creek Farm Association, which has been extant very close to 50 years now, and dealt with the problems that were beginning to develop in terms of turning the access and area that started at Duck Creek all the way up towards Maidstone, our raison d'etre, if you will, was to prevent overdevelopment of the waterfront, to prevent it becoming a strip of motels and so forth, although in the age of Airbnb that may be moot. In any event, the third thing I wanted to ask you is if anybody could really answer the question, if I have lost count, forgive me. Can anybody really answer the question, how many oysters grown to maturity and/or clams does it take to replace one septic system in terms of water quality improvement?
I don't know.
Well, then why are we going to spend close to $6 million on water quality improvement if we're not sure what the actual effect will be? Now, my first job, you should know, at 10 years old, was opening clams for my father in Coney Island. And I love shellfish. I support aquaculture. Everyone whom I represent supported the idea of the town buying 36 Gann Road property, 1.1222 acres, for aquaculture improvement and continuing the hatchery's usage. I also assume you probably didn't know that they had extended that extra 50-foot flupsy off the dock there, which also impaired access, but which has been moved. So we all supported that. But we were blindsided, as apparently you were as well, by the idea that in addition to using the bought property, which was the largest structure that was allowed on that lot of 2,500 square feet, to be increased to an 8,000 square foot commercial facility.
I think it's 7,500, isn't it?
Well, oh, only 7,500.
Okay,
Sorry,
listen,
Jim.
you know, I don't exaggerate, you know, because
No,
it
no, I'm
confuses the whole.
Well, they were gonna, I heard the addition was gonna be 5,500 square feet, and the secra, bogus secra, that is submitted, says there's no possible environmental effect. You guys are supposed to be protecting access. I respect that. Certainly, John, I certainly respect your background in aquaculture, and I think aquaculture is absolutely, as do all of my neighbors, part of a possible solution, if any solution is available to us. But I definitely support the idea that anything that's going to go on that property, anything that's going to happen there, any increase in density should be done according to the same rules that any of us, all of us, would have to follow. And the town's refusal, or the majority of the board's refusal, to submit to planning, to submit to and follow the same zoning rules, simply so that they can put up something that they feel would be a good thing and does not have to be where it's being put, is absurd and wrong and unjust, and we will fight it and continue to fight it any way that we can.
It's my understanding that this will be going before the planning board.
It's everyone's understanding,
That
but
it's scheduled.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, John.
It's my understanding that it's been scheduled.
As a matter of fact, we were unaware of that because when I went to the planning board last to look for whatever might have been scheduled, I was told by the planning person who is in charge that the town doesn't have to go to planning. We have nothing to do with this. If that's changed, I certainly haven't read it in the press.
Yeah, that's a caveat that unfortunately, and I do agree with you on that, that is put in most municipal legislations, that they aren't subject necessarily to their own rules. But you know what? It does fly in the face of right and wrong.
Thank you. And that's absolutely the case. This is an unjust process. This is a surprise to all of us, although we were assured that we would, and I speak for my organization, that we would be part of the process every step of the way. We have yet to have one conversation with anyone on the town board in public about this process or about this particular project. So what I'm here to do finally is to urge and request that you withdraw any support you have for this project unless it is done according to the same rules that everyone else would have to follow, and unless and until we can figure out if this is the best use of our money. Grant money is your and my tax money. It's not free money. We don't print specie. We pay it. And you can't just sit back and say, oh yeah, it's okay because the town said so. Not true. If you've no questions, I bid you all good evening.
Just that, John, we first put the hatchery on Game Road in what, in 1990 or 1991?
Yeah, 90, maybe 90.
This facility's been there since around early 1990. The reason it's put there is because the Montauk facility, the water in Block Island Sound is too cold to successfully grow these species. The water in 3 Mile Harbor is a much better temperature, you get much better productivity, and the shellfish grow-out facility in Montauk has been there for 30 years, right?
They can.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So acting like we just picked, support for enlarging that facility and making it more productive, you fail to take into consideration the fact that you're just actually increasing a 30-year-old facility that's been used very successfully for all that time.
I guess the only thing I would say is, in relation to a support letter for a grant application, without a support for a grant application, there is no grant. And, I mean, as you said, Ira, you and your neighbors did support that property being bought for the purposes of aquaculture.
We supported the house.
Well, whatever, it's the property, I understand the scale and all is all in flux and a matter of debate. My only point is, there's a bind here if there's a grant application, there's a grant being offered, and the town of the Hatchery would like to apply for that grant, and that grant is more likely to be given if there's support in the community, then what's it supposed to do?
Okay.
Are we not supposed to, is it not supposed to look for that support? And are we not supposed to support the concept?
Absolutely. Absolutely, you should. We all support the concept. We all see aquaculture as an important activity. And we see it as something that's traditional and can have an ameliorative effect in terms of water quality. However, what we don't support is sending out letters to people that are involved growing oysters and ignoring specifically those most directly affected by an overblown, overpriced, moderately, possibly, maybe effective water quality improvement project. I've lived there the whole time the hatchery's there, Bill, and I certainly have never had a problem with it before. But the fact that it has grown like Topsy and now wants to put basically a commercial factory on a residential lot because it can, without asking the property owners, is wrong. And you see justice as clearly as do I. I know that.
But hey, before everybody leaves here, clearly, I think things under the heading of I need to try and apply for this grant, it seems like we sort of got out of sequence. And to me, it doesn't seem like the opportunity for the stakeholder community input to be registered in this project has passed. So, being that so far everybody supports aquaculture, okay, but we have some issues with the way this was gone about and perhaps where and how it's going to be done.
And scale.
And scale. Well, Ira, I'm going to tell you something. On the scale, my concern is it might be too small. Okay, you're coming from a 75-foot square, but wait a second. Mark, your issue is, and you brought it up the last time, is we're taking a piece of residential real estate and we're changing the use to commercial. Well, we already have a facility at Gann Road that's on a piece of commercial real estate, and I'm not looking at a map here. Is there an opportunity to move so I'm going to call it the industrialized aspect of this, to the commercial site and reconfigure this site plan that is more sensitive to sort of the neighborhood and at the same time perhaps might even be more cost effective. I don't know. My understanding is the design on this facility was somewhat driven by the intention to try and mitigate any issues that the neighbors, the residential neighbors, would have with it.
But the neighbors were never
But see, this
the neighbors were never consulted.
But okay, but now that somebody's thrown the party, didn't invite you, but you're standing across the street calling the police that the noise is too loud. If you got invited to the party now, would you change your position? Or would you have an open mind to change your position?
That would honestly depend on what the actual input was. Kathy Burke-Gonzalez on the town board has tried to, at the CAC, of which I happen to be a member, to create a committee, asked me to chair it. And I said, Kathy, I'd be happy to do that and find out. But you already have your plan in place. You've already committed $170,000 to do engineering. You are not listening to the community. You are rushing the community in. And if I'm supposed to be a rubber stamp for something, you got the wrong guy. It's that simple.
Well, I know, hey, Aaron, one thing I do know about you is that you're not a rubber stamp kind of guy.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you want real input and you want to deal with the community and you want to get this project done, then let's start to talk about it. But if that project is still going to be whatever you've come up with and put on your little model, and where'd that 450 grand go, then that's not the right, I don't believe that's an appropriate project for that particular site. We support aquaculture, we supported the purchase, it's a 1 acre lot. If Ms. Vorpal wanted to put an 8,500 or an 8,000 square foot or 7,500 square foot facility on that, they'd laugh her off the floor. They wouldn't even consider it. So where is justice? Where is government as opposed to rulers?
The original 2018 resolution to purchase the property included using the house for aquaculture.
Okay, what were we gonna do? We're gonna be raising the clams in the toilet?
First floor,
I don't know.
I don't know, but that's what the...
Fish tanks and...
That's what the original resolution called for in 2000, when it was purchased. And then the additional 5,500 square foot hatchery, I understand there's a nursery. I understand why the nursery is on the commercial dock. I understand why the nursery is in 3 Mile Harbor. But moving the hatchery from Montauk, where there's already a larger functional hatchery that needs some updating for sure, that hatchery is already producing tons of shellfish. Sure, they get some die-off of scallops in transit, but that minuscule amount of die-off, maybe they move just the scallop production to the house. Leave the hatchery out in Montauk. Just invite us to the planning board. Have an application and invite us to the planning board. That's all I want to do. I want to say to the planning board.
I'll say it again, I believe there is a schedule plan.
But is that an application for site plan approval, or is that just planning board, we want your input on our plan?
Last week, I asked him about what was going on. He told me it was going to go before the planning board, and it's been scheduled. I'm not sure.
It hasn't been
what the
noticed
date
for what
is.
it's worth.
And typically, when something is going to the planning board, there's a notice
Well,
up on the property.
Where did you get that
It's
information
publicly
from?
noticed for everyone to
spoke
see.
Farley this past week, and I asked him what was going on with the review that's been requested, and he said it has been scheduled to go before the planning board. I'm not sure.
I don't know how they schedule
Maybe
it
it's
without
not
having notices
on
up on
the
the
list.
property that's numero uno for the process.
Hey, John, can I
Put
ask
the
a-
notices up.
Can I ask a question? Earlier you said that the grant had support, and that's where the letter came from. Did I
Well,
understand
what I'm
you
saying
correctly?
is, when you
'Cause I'm just saying-
apply for a
So I
grant,
just want to finish the question. Was there a group of constituents that asked you to weigh in with a letter of support, or was that support you felt was warranted?
that's support I felt, and the rest of the
It's the
committee felt
aquaculture
was
committee.
warranted.
Okay, thank you.
And I personally wrote a letter of support
Oh, that's good, thank
as a civilian.
And may I ask, were you aware that the plan was to create an additional 5,500 square foot commercial facility?
Yeah.
And how come we didn't know about it? I mean, I just live right there.
Well, I knew about it by watching town board meeting and seeing the presentations and all that.
I see. Well, that's great, you're part of the town government, but you know what?
I watched it on TV. I don't go to the town, but I'm not a town board member.
It came out at a Montauk work session. That's when the first presentation, and that Montauk work session wasn't even televised. I can't go back and see what was proposed back at that work session.
Okay, but
I was
guys-
at that work
But
session.
guys, you know what, I think we're spending,
we spent a lot of time.
we're spending too much time rehashing the past.
Yeah.
And I think we should be focusing a little bit more on the present and the future at this point. And
That's kind of what I'm trying, that's what I'm trying to drive
I think you've made
at.
our board aware of your feelings, and they're not falling on deaf ears.
And I think a lot of your concerns are going to be appropriately brought into the planning board.
But they
That's where the
haven't been
special-
brought in thus far.
Aquaculture is allowable on a residential lot with a special permit, and that will be heard by the planning board. It's my understanding.
Well,
That's where that facility, the sizing, all that stuff is going to be adjudicated.
First, we're hearing it, John. First.
But you know that the planning board does exactly that. You have to have a proposal, it's presented to the planning board, and then the planning board. Well, I happen to be a real estate broker in this community.
I'm aware of
For
that.
26 years, and I know myself, when you have a plan to build a building, you present your plan, and it is modified or adjusted through the planning department. And then it is
Fantastic.
seen before the zoning board. So this has been in the public domain, it's been in the newspapers. As an aquaculture committee member, we signed a letter of support for the aquaculture program. And there's a lot of falsehood in Mr. Mendelman's letter to the trustees, and it's sad, because you don't have to skew things to make a point. Well, I asked you certain questions that were serious questions, and I prefaced by asking you, these are questions that I have, and I enumerated them. So for you to write what you did, that's not right. So I'm going to say, for the record, if you want to have a discussion with me about the things that I've discussed, that we have said in this room, which can be seen on television, please do, because I'm here to talk to you. I'm here to listen to you. But when I read things like this, it is, in my opinion, very sad to skew this, and then to stand there and read a letter like this, which is filled with falsehoods. I'm sorry, but I appreciate your coming tonight to address the town trustees, but I find terrific fault with this letter. And I would love you to call me, and let's get together and let's meet and talk.
Love to.
Good.
I thank you for your time, and I thank you, Jim, and everybody, really, for listening. And John, I hope you're right. But from what I can see, from what I've been told, from what I've heard, the one meeting that the supervisor and Mr. Lee scheduled with a selected group of people was canceled when it became known that other people might show up. So your assertions, I respect your background, truly, but the town board has had several opportunities to commit to going through planning and has avoided and demurred from so doing. If this is now going to happen, we're all for it. But I am expanding my house after owning it for 20 years, and I know that every property owner around me I contacted personally and in writing before I could get a permit or do anything else. And I got a natural resources special permit, and I did everything that I had to do, and I ensured that I was not asking for any variance, zone change, or anything else. Just do it by the rules. That's all we're looking for. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for the information.
Lori Wilshire? Is it? No way.
Excuse me there. Lori Wiltshire, Land Planning Services. Just here for two things. We just submitted an application for 17 Turbell Lane to reconstruct a walkway, trim Phragmites, and replace a dock at the end of the walkway. I submitted a plan, a survey, as well as a certificate of occupancy stating that the walkway and the dock were pre-existing and non-conforming. So this is basically replacement in place. I can't say in kind. We're going to be using, what do they call them? The flow-through decking and the composite materials to support the walkway and the dock. So there won't be any sorts of contaminants or CCA or anything like that involved in the project. We'll be submitting a protocol about how the Phragmites are going to be trimmed and where they'll be taken to, because we've received a letter from the DEC basically requesting that, so we'll send that to them and to you, and I wanted to get your comments, and then we'll figure out what revisions we're going to make and address everyone's comments at once.
Okay. I've been in communication with Lori for a little while on this, and I think the biggest sticking point initially that we had or would have was not the cutting of the Phragmites. This is no different than actually the Birch property, which is immediately next door, which has a cutting permit, but the legality of the dock and boardwalk. Because when the application was made, we didn't seem to have any records of this dock or the boardwalk. Okay, so Lori did do due diligence here, went back to the village, located a CO where these structures are listed. So the next step forward here is we've made arrangements to meet at the site to go over the proposed plan. The dock is being rebuilt, but the boardwalk is being rebuilt and relocated, correct?
No. So
Okay.
the walkway is going to be rebuilt exactly where it is now. It's in very bad shape.
Something was moving.
Yeah, so there's a dock that they got into trouble with the DEC, that they had to take off the end, and they placed it, if you look at your survey.
Oh, is that what the boardwalk is?
No, the boardwalk is the walk out to the water.
Okay.
There's a little L-shaped thing that's kind of laying up close to the gate. It used to be at the end of the walkway, that's the dock.
Okay.
So that's going to be replaced at the end of the walkway.
Okay.
And what year were those walkway and dock installed?
They have, the CO is from 2007, and it lists those things as pre-existing. But hold on, I think there was an earlier.
Yeah, there were two.
Yeah, there's a 2003.
2007 and...
Where are the permitting applications for those?
That's a very good question. Lori, did you come across any applications for these with the village?
No, it's pre-existing and non-conforming.
Okay, yeah, but...
Where's the proof when it was installed?
2004 doesn't establish this as pre-existing non-conforming.
I guess the building inspector at the time did the research to determine that they predated zoning.
Okay, I think we're gonna need to do a little deeper dive.
I think I did, and I don't think there's anything because
Okay.
if they were there in 1957 when zoning came into place, and they're acknowledging that in the certificate.
Lord, could you please go up to the podium?
But they don't,
So
but they don't reference 1956.
They don't reference anything. They just
Yeah.
say they're pre-existing and non-conforming.
Existing non-conforming necessarily mean it came before zoning? Can't something be approved, the rules change? After zoning, something's approved, under zoning, the rules changed.
And then it's
that becomes
grandfathered.
Grandfathered as pre-existing non-conforming. Doesn't have to be
I tell you what,
back to
I think
before
it'd be
zoning.
good, we'll try and dot the I on this, just to establish the actual,
Installation date?
well, we may not be able to get an installation.
Is it on
date.
the dock?
We got a lot of aerial photographs.
If it's pre-existing non-conforming, there may be a date that predates this, that it establishes that it was there.
So was a trustee permit ever issued
And what
for this
is it, what is
property?
it on, what is it on?
You said
1984.
there was no record of it, but you found something in the village,
The village records.
the village records, but no permit from the
way this
trustees was in that file.
was when the
We didn't, we
application
tried.
was made, Arlene picked up that it just coincided. By the way, when you handed the application, and you did it the same week we were collecting all the fees for the dock fees. So it sort of highlighted the fact that this property had never been paying any dock fees over the many years. That's what brought the dock issue to the forefront and the age of it. So I think it's going to be important to try and establish, basically what needs to happen is we need to establish the presence of this dock pre-1984.
gonna have to look through the inventory of docks.
Yeah,
I mean, it could show up there even though we don't have a permit for it.
okay.
Who would do that?
Well, we'll do that on our
We
end.
have it.
We don't have, do we have jurisdiction over the walkway or just the dock?
Just a dock.
That's what I thought.
What is it you're going to look at? The
There was an inventory done.
Inventory.
Docks.
When was the dock in existence? Do we know this span
Well,
of years when it actually stood and was in
It's
the pond?
still a little questionable right now. It
Or
sounds,
do you have any-
sounds like they listed it as pre-existing non-conforming on the 2004 CO. It was reiterated in the 2007 CO. But you know what? Let's just make sure that it was there.
What's the
So
size
don't
of the dock?
waste
Sorry?
our
What
time.
size is
It's
it?
very small. It's
not
about
63.
64
It's like-
square feet. It kind of goes out, and it just, a little L-shaped thing at the end. It's basically what you would use to get in and out of a kayak or a canoe.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, there's no motor vehicles allowed
There's
on
one-
Hook
there's
Pond.
one neighboring-
So we're not going to be
neighboring
chopping up the,
property.
well, it's not even titled, so there's no eelgrass either.
Right.
Is this the neighboring property?
No,
No.
neighboring properties over here.
Yeah,
When was this trustee dock inventory done?
years
Year?
ago.
What year?
I can't tell you the
Oh.
exact year.
The regulations were 1984 about
Right.
no docks. so.
No docks.
All right, so you'll do that. I'll meet with Jim at the site, and then we will reconvene in 2 weeks? Sure. Okay.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
October 18th, because we have Columbus
And
Day.
that's a Friday.
October 18th?
Friday,
Yeah, that's
right.
going to be a Friday
So it's
meeting.
more
It's the
like-
holiday.
3 weeks.
4 weeks.
Oh,
I'll
now it's
just
4
put it in my
weeks?
calendar for October 18th. That's all.
Friday.
Okay, October 18th, Friday.
Lori, I'll see you.
Yeah.
Look at
But
this.
the other thing I'm here for is Joe Perella next door, the 43 Turbo Lane.
Yeah, did we vote on that, closing that out last meeting? I thought we had.
No, we didn't vote on it.
Oh, okay. Because we got we got Greg's pictures.
Yes,
Everything seemed fine.
yes.
The as-built, I think we're waiting for the as-built.
Do you have an,
I've not seen one
but I
yet.
gotta be honest with you.
We did vote on it.
I'm not sure, you know, guys, on these core logs, sometimes they're not
Yeah,
showing.
I remember
on
this
surveys.
discussion. I thought we did vote on it, no?
We didn't vote, but.
Okay.
So I remember you saying you were.
Lori, I'm not sure that there is something to get an as-built on here.
I agree, because core logs and revegetation aren't going to show up on a survey.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. This is one that I wouldn't be asking for an as-built on. We're just wasting our time and an applicant's money. We do have the completion photos. I think the membership is welcome to go out and inspect the site. I've inspected it. I don't have a problem with what was done. I think there's even some dialogue about expanding the core log
Project,
project
really?
to the south a bit.
All right, well, I'll let the client weigh in on that. He hasn't been around lately, because the,
I see the house is all
yeah,
torn
yeah,
up.
so. I'll let him take a look at it, and if he wants to expand it, we'll come back to you for that.
Do you want to make a motion to close this out, or?
I'd like to make a motion to close this out unless any members here want to go down and inspect this property for themselves.
Rick seems to have a question.
Well, I'd like to take a look at it, Jim. I don't think I've
Okay.
seen it since the work's been done. So
All right.
it's all right just for the period of time between now and the next meeting, but I'll make sure I get down there.
Sure.
Is it available to be seen without calling you?
Very easy. The house is under
They're not there?
construction, they're not living there, there's no gate.
Okay.
You just have to walk down to the water's edge and take a look around. I'll just email the client and say that this will be happening.
Okay. And does it hold you or the client up in any way to wait?
No, not at all,
Okay, thank you.
not at all.
Okay.
Job's done.
Yeah, and we got it done before the expiration, so it shouldn't hold us up at all.
Thank you, Lauren.
Great, okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right, let's move on to committees. Georgia Capon's committees, application for Gray, 17 Turbo.
We just did.
We just
We
did
did
that.
that.
Okay. Perella, we just did? Okay, new business, application received from the Creeks for Phragmity Management Permit for 291, 253, and 249 Montauk Highway.
Okay. As some of the membership here may or may not know, the Creeks has been going on for quite some time. They did have a permit several years ago to do Phragmites cutting. They did exactly one cut. The pond was high, and it was done over the winter. The pond was high that following spring. No cuts were made. But it was coupled with some revegetation work, some pretty considerable revegetation work, which not only did the cutting not occur, but the revegetation didn't occur either. We had made arrangements with the applicant that we would issue a renewal on the permit with the understanding that prior to renewing that permit, they would come to us with a formal, hard and fast plan for revegetation. In the interim, they got hung up with the village on multiple structures that had either been expanded, built completely without permits, and they've kind of languished since then, dealing with the village.
Can I ask you a question? You said that the vegetation didn't take. Do we know why?
They didn't plant it.
Oh,
It doesn't take it. They
okay.
didn't plant it.
Well, that makes sense. All right.
So, I did have a conversation with InterScience, Mike over at InterScience today. The revegetation work has been completed. I have a call into Billy Hayjack, and what we are going to do is make arrangements to visit this property. One, make sure that the revegetation truly exists. It is a much better and more detailed revegetation or cutting plan because it carefully identifies the areas. And if anybody wants to look at this, it's here. But right now, there's literally nothing for us to do with this today. This is something that I would urge Rick, we make arrangements for you to be at this meeting
Yes,
as well as Brian, because this is one that, it's old, it has a real history. In moving forward on this cutting program, we want to make sure that, one, it's done within the confines of the permits, and it's followed up on, just because of the way it's gone in the past. But
Jim, this is the current plan here?
this is the current cutting plan. I question why there's no revegetation plan for this.
Right, because this whole area to the left of the main house was to be
Revegetated?
revegetated with a buffer.
Okay, this plan does not include any of the revegetation work that was done. So we're gonna actually see
Well, I
that.
can see it wasn't.
What are the orange areas
No,
indicate?
those are, I think those are old photographs
Okay.
on here, so I'm anxious to
Those are
see.
the
So
areas
the main, the
What
main.
is
Phragmites.
actually there?
to be cut.
Okay. I know that was the main area, I think, of contention. and
Yeah,
then-
this, well, it was this
Over
area,
here,
it was,
too.
it was actually this area in here
Yeah,
was
there
the
was supposed to be a
biggest.
little gray section by the
Yeah,
house.
but anyway, we'll be looking at that and
Okay, it'll be
hopefully,
interesting, yeah. That was,
Yeah.
that was 4 years ago.
yes, it is.
They had the fire and stuff, so, I mean, it was...
Yeah, there's a lot been going on. All right,
Very good.
So we're going to table that. Okay, old business, anything on East Inlet, Nappy Harbor?
we did have a meeting last Wednesday at our offices with, Drew Bennett was there, Kim Shaw was there, Rick was there, myself. Who else was there? George Elding.
I was there.
And John was there. I knew there was somebody else. And I think it was pretty, I was encouraged.
It was a good kickstart meeting.
Yeah.
It had, I think, got a lot of positive momentum for an important project, a really big project that's gonna require a lot of planning, a lot of multi-agency
Yeah, and I
cooperation.
just want to, hey, Arlene, I just want to make you aware, I made a considerable purchase from Harry and David's for some grapefruits. And just when that bill arrives, just put it on the NAPI committee. Okay?
Grapefruit?
And
It's integral to the
Tidal flow analysis.
Check the
tidal
tidal
flow
flow.
analysis.
Oranges
Look
work
at Harry
out.
and David.
That's all, that's the only number I had.
the Peconic Estuary Program has a list of habitat restoration sites, and they're calling for any additional projects that a town might want to put on that list, so I'm going to try to get that in. It's due by October 1st to
And
put this
I did speak to,
project
I
on
did
it.
speak to Chris Pickerel. He's very willing to write a letter of support.
Better watch out for those letters of support.
Yeah, and I also have a call into Matt Sclafani to see if he will support this.
And we're gonna
I think
also
it's
speak with
a, it's
Dr.
a good follow-up to,
I wasn't the one speaking to Dr. Gobler, that was
It's on my
you.
plate.
considering that the original,
Okay.
the original work that we discussed at the meeting was done under a Peconic Estuary Program grant. This is a kind of a natural follow-up to it. And we take the recommendations that that report made and put them into this nominating form, and it might have a chance of flowing through to free up some money to
At least get the design phase
get the
of the
design
project.
of the inlet, right?
This could be a really good project for,
Yeah, it's going to take a while. All right. Little Northwest Creek. Anything on that?
We did have a committee meeting with Fred Thiel and Bridget Fleming to discuss a similar scenario about assessing the needs for potential environmental dredging, a management plan for Little Northwest Creek. And we took away a basic starting point, which we're now going to review with stakeholder groups from the Sag Harbor Village and East Hampton communities near the creek at Sag Harbor Village Hall tomorrow afternoon, I believe, at 5 p.m.
glad you reminded me of that.
Yeah.
I didn't have
So
that.
we have a very proactive
What time is that?
group of neighbors.
5 p.m.
5 p.m.?
It's a very proactive group of neighbors that are, really looking for some leadership from the trustees, and the beach is badly eroded and the creek is badly shoaled. So it's a good candidate for a restoration project and a management plan.
Has anybody from the Northwest Alliance Group been notified? Should I reach out to them?
It's not a community meeting, this is a specific committee meeting.
Oh,
So
okay, I thought it
all-
was the public.
The public and Northwest Alliance was at the meeting at the beach 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Has formed a committee that's going to represent their communities, and they will be in attendance at the meeting at the village. So we now have a more formalized public-private partnership that'll be the steering committee for this project.
Who is the meeting? Who does it include?
It includes the mayor of Sag Harbor Village, Kathleen. It includes Fred Thiel. It includes Bridget Fleming. Jim and I will be in attendance. Members of the Sag Harbor Village Harbor Committee, Will Sharp and John Parker, who were here to present initially on the project, and the heads of the Ninva, Azores, and Sag Harbor Hills neighborhood associations, and possibly one or two other members from the public. But it's in the smaller conference room at Village Hall in Sag Harbor, so there had to be a limited number of participants. But the idea was to get an understanding of how do we get to the design phase, so to speak, as Jim brought up for the Napeague Harbor project, which seems to be a common starting point with these restoration and environmental dredging projects.
Is this the time to also say Little Northwest Creek or Northwest Creek about the seating? Should we bring it up as long as we're talking about Northwest Creek?
Absolutely, please.
October 3rd, John Aldred, and Rick Drew, and Gina Bradley, and John Ryan, and the middle school environmental group will be helping to seed, right? We've
Correct.
decided on October 3rd, and it's from 3:30 to 5 o'clock.
Which
and-
works well for the after-school program.
Yeah, the kids will
That's why we
come.
moved it forward from 5
Yeah,
p.m.
the kids will come as they did last year. We did it on 3 Mile Harbor launch, which I saw that note and I thought, if my memory is serving me correctly, but yeah, you answered them. So we'll be doing it at the little Northwest Creek and seeding the harbor with oyster seeds. So that will be fun for the kids and fun for us.
Great experience.
Yeah.
It's a new group each year, so it's great that Johnny Ryan.
And the other
brings the
teacher
kids
who's
out.
going to come is it Lisa?
I am not sure, but he usually has a couple of other
Yeah.
teachers or parent-teacher assistants to help chaperone the children.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun last year, so.
Yeah, it's a great time.
The kids have great time.
Project, yep.
Yep. Knock on wood, it doesn't rain. Otherwise, I think it's, did we say that 4th is the rain date?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
All right, committee reports, Akbon Cod Creek, we have the Clearwater Beach Property Owners Association, close out that dredging permit.
Did you speak
I
with Jim?
reached out to Jim to have a conversation with him, I guess, under the structure of the Harbor Management Committee, and I haven't heard back. I'm going to give him another call tomorrow.
Okay. I had a conversation with Brian Frank today. He would actually like to participate if possible in that. Just because there's a ZBA permit that's in play, that there's some questions about the,
I'll try to push forward on this more aggressively and
Okay.
get something together the next day or two.
What's
And
that?
I'll check in with you.
Jim, what's his last name?
Carforo. He's the president of the Clearwater Beach Homeowners Association and was the former Marina Cod Creek liaison, so to speak, to trustees and other municipal.
Yeah, this is about the spoil.
All right, in aquaculture, we have water quality testing at Sunset Cove Marina.
A little background on this. John Nicholas, who's got an application into us and got an application into the DEC, an updated application into the DEC for turning his marina into an oyster growing operation, had asked the DEC if that area is closed seasonally because of the marina, closed to shell fishing seasonally because of the marina, as are all marinas areas. He asked the DEC if it could be possibly opened to shell fishing and classified as shellfish-worthy water. And they need to do water quality testing to accomplish that. So he asked me if we would be interested in helping out with that. The DEC asked me if we would be willing to help out with that, and I said we would. And then the next day, I think it was the very next day, it rained over the limit, which was, it rained 2.5 inches, which was well over the limit. So I went out and did a water test on that, and I'll continue to do that until they have what they need to determine whether that can be opened or not.
Are you running those samples to Dr. Gobler's lab?
No, it's DC, water quality.
Right. So where do the samples go for that?
Setauket to the DC
Oh, okay.
labs.
Okay. Wow.
okay. So, John, who's paying for these tests?
I think the DC is just running them because it does have the opportunity, if this ceases to be a marina, there is an opportunity to reclassify these waters. I don't think.
Okay, I just was wondering, because it seems like something that this is, for the moment, strictly in the interest of a private enterprise, and that any of the testing should typically be borne by the applicant, not
The
the agency.
The DEC is probably paying for the testing. They'll be running the test because it's in their interest to.
And it's also in the interest, if there were any shellfish there, which is not necessarily the greatest shellfish producing area, natural shellfish producing area, but if there were, it's closed now and it would be opened, it would be to the benefit of the public as well.
There's only a couple of boats that are still actively tied up there,
Right.
but there is the legacy pilings and bulkheading, which is quite old. I don't know if that's creosote treated or,
Well, there's no proposal to change that.
okay.
His proposal to us, and then his revised proposal, which we don't have, but it's before the DEC, shows that all still in place and his gear attached to it.
So the only change would be the last few boats would be out of that area, and the rest of the infrastructure would stay in place as is, and the testing would reflect the impacts of whatever's
The
there.
DEC,
Right.
the DEC puts the marina clauses in place, like a 500-foot arc, because they're concerned about the possibility of one of the boats doing a live discharge.
Right.
of
You can see those on a lot of the
material.
shellfish maps.
Yeah, they put a circle on there just for that, so if there's no longer an active marina or a group of boats there, we could possibly change the status.
And they will also look at what is there. Let's say he says, well, I want to keep 2 boats, my own boat and a boat for the
There'd still be a
operation.
marina
The DEC will look at that and determine whether they consider that still enough of a marina use or not enough of a marina use. So they have some discretion. It's not strictly water quality or, they have some discretion to determine whether, they consider it a marina use or not.
Has John decided that he might wish to keep open a couple of slips? Because when he spoke
know.
with
I
us, he
haven't
did, so,
Yeah,
okay.
he's
He never said
using-
anything.
He's using 5 or 6 now. I don't know who's.
Oh, he is?
boats they are.
Okay,
Yeah, there's some private slipholders still there.
okay.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful place, a wonderful property, nice people down there. It's a really special spot.
Yeah, it is nice.
And I just want to point out that his application is for a private aquaculture situation as opposed to a town aquaculture.
And one thing, I should maybe just mention this, just keep it in the back of your minds. In all this, discussion about the hatchery, I sort of reviewed the LWRP, and there's a lot of language in the LWRP about aquaculture. Some of it's contradictory, but one thing that's very consistent is it mentions the public good and the public benefit. And this is, the Nicholas application is the first time anybody's really looking at a commercial aquaculture operation being proposed in town. And we have to decide, and we have to grant the permit or consider the permit. One thing that I think we need to think about is, how are we going, what benefit is this going to have for the public? And one way, I know, for example, Frank M. Flowers, which is a 150-year-old shellfish growing operation in Oyster Bay, has leases in Oyster Bay. They lease bottomland from Oyster Bay town. And in addition to paying for the bottom, they have provisions in there where they give back a certain amount of their production to Oyster Bay to be seeded into the public grounds. So I think that's probably an appropriate way of us looking at compensation for the use of our bottomland as part of this.
Well, wait a second. I'm assuming that, the marinas pay us based on the pilings and the footage of dock, okay? We're changing things a little bit, and there was discussion back when Rick Whalen was still our attorney about the way we bill for marinas and stuff. In some ways, doesn't make a lot of sense because we're not leasing pilings, we're not leasing docks, we're really leasing square footage. And we may have to establish some policy related to an aquaculture program that may ultimately change how we evaluate all of these things. Not to say that we're going to be charging more money, but it just how we look at things, because clearly this is going to occupy a significant portion of public bottomland. They'll be paying a lease, and that may not necessarily mean, because heck, when a marina was there, the public wasn't going to have access to that bottomland. So I think we should probably tread lightly for the moment.
Well, I agree that it's reasonable to think that we might want to alter the terms. It's not a marina. Why are we charging by piling and foot? However, he is using the same arrangement of.
Yeah, and he'll probably, for the
walkways,
moment,
aisles.
and for the moment, to not cloud the issue, it'll probably be good to just sort of collect accordingly.
Yeah, but I think it's not inappropriate, and I think it would be very appropriate to also consider a bit of a give back of product to be devoted to the public grounds.
Yeah, I would be supportive of that. I think that's really important. That partnership needs to be strengthened, I think, and throughout all of the aquaculture we're doing. I think it's a great way for those programs to give back and build public trust
And that's
Isn't that really what we're doing
the
now?
gardening program is set up.
That's what we do now, which I think is wonderful.
Excellent.
Yep.
And for the same
work.
reason, that's, very important part of the local waterfront revitalization plans view of aquaculture.
And if anybody wants some oysters, I have tons of them that are ready. Yeah?
All right.
No advertising.
Oh, no, I'm not selling them. I'm giving them away for free to friends.
All right, beaches. First Coastal, request permission to do maintenance work, breaking up the sand and clay silt and replanting beach grass as needed on 3 permitted dune restoration projects that were done last spring on the following properties: 101 Lily Pond Lane, 171 Lily Pond Lane, 11 West End Road.
Is this a modification to a permit?
It's, this is neither modification, expansion, or a new permit. This is what comes under the heading of warranty work. So that's all that's going on here. They had some problems with some of the plantings. Some of the plantings crapped out, whether it's related to the clods of silt that came up out of some of the dredging here, or whether it was related to the dry conditions we had. In either case, Billy has asked to go and re-enter these areas, break up the clods, loosen up the ground. It's all handwork, and replant beach grass. I would like to make a motion to approve this. It's not, I don't think it should require a permit, because I think we're still working under the heading of the old permits. This
It's
is-
maintenance.
Yeah, it's maintenance.
It's maintenance.
Permits,
And
those permits were closed out, but the fact is, it's, if they weren't closed out, the permits would still be in place right now.
yeah, and I think
Work
it's a
was
good
done.
thing.
I looked at all the projects, this is something we should do.
Okay.
Yeah, we were gonna actually
Can we-
do some of this work down by Georgica at the end of the last project, when the plovers showed up and stopped us from doing it.
Well, I think they're gonna
Yes.
do, I think that's gonna be done around the same time, which was to basically bust up some of that stuff and drag
So
the
this
beach.
is
The
basically,
note that came from Billy says that they want to have this
It's now.
completed by spring, and it would take 1 day per property. So it's a maintenance thing, and I think we should, if you're going to make a motion,
I'll
I
second the
would be
motion.
happy.
Sounds good. We should support the homeowners that are working with our
You're
permits.
seconding it? All in favor?
Oh, aye.
Aye.
All right, education, Chamber of Commerce Fall Festival.
Okay, yes, I am signed up for the Fall Festival, which is occurring on Saturday, October 19th, and it's from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Everybody knows the drill, go with a tent, and if I can have some of,
we're gonna
some
have it in Herrick's Park.
Herrick Park, yes. We are a not-for-profit, so I took care of that as a starter to get us going. That's from, again, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., October 19th, and it will be the last, I believe, the last festival of the season for the Chamber of Commerce. There's a new director there now. I believe his name is Michael Howell. Steve Rangel has gone back to Tennessee, so we have a new person in place. And going on to the education outreach, if anybody can help me put the tent up, that would be terrific, and you don't have to stay.
What's the date again, Susan?
October 19th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. But you're more than welcome to come and hang out and see everybody who comes to visit. Again, the proceeds of the items that we will be selling all go to Captain William J. Wysom Scholarship Fund for our college education tuition funds that we give every year. And I'm going to move us right to the education outreach. I have wanted to speak to Brian about this first, and we haven't connected yet, but I have an idea for carrying forward through in this year. I've contacted Pearson High School, Dr. Schumacher, who has the environmental group, so they're interested in having the trustees come and, talk about the history of the trustees, and I'm going to see if I can get Ashley Oliver from the aquaculture group, as we have done in the past, to do a presentation. And this year, instead of just doing the balloon thing, which is another thing I'll talk about, I thought it might be good to get the kids actually involved in creating something, similar to what the kids did from Montauk School when they came to Town Hall and they drew pictures about the balloons. So I thought we could go visit each school, as we do during the year, and have a poster contest, and have the kids come up with a poster that's theme-oriented, and we can vote on it the same way that we do the essay, and then actually make a poster at the end of the year. I don't know whether it should be just by the elementary school, and then the middle school, and the high school, but it would give them something to do that's creative, that is meaningful to our community, expressing themselves creatively, and in the end, it would get hung in our office, for the year, the winning posters, and we could also make them up and sell them for the Captain Rissam Scholarship Fund.
I think that's a good idea. Actually, when we started the hatchery in Montauk, we had like a opening and all that, and we went to the, we didn't go, but CCOM and some other groups in Montauk hooked up with the school, the elementary school, and had the kids draw posters of marine life.
Right.
Most of them drew pictures of lobsters, and then we hung them up around the hatchery for the opening, and, I mean, the kids were totally into it.
Yeah,
And
see, it gives them pride, and the family members come, and they're excited.
My daughter went to that, did a picture of a lobster, and this is how bizarre. You're bringing this up, and I got this flashback. And what was wild is Betty Duryea saw the picture of the lobster and was very taken. It was a charming lobster. And years later, when my daughter was getting ready to go to college, Betty contacted my daughter and said, hey, have you considered going to Skidmore? And no, my daughter honestly hadn't considered going anywhere. And she convinced my daughter to apply to Skidmore.
They have a good art program.
With the lobster picture?
No, but it all started with
Did she end up going to
picture.
Skidmore? Did she?
Yeah, she
Okay.
applied late, got accepted early. And
That's my son, exactly.
I'm sure Betty Duryea, because she was a trustee at Skidmore, that she had something to do with it. So, it was all related to you there, John.
To me, if you involve the children.
Redeems that whole letter of support for the agriculture thing. It's a little of the yin and yang.
Anyway, so you see how that had meaning to her all those years later, right? So I thought that would be a way, rather than showing kids presentations and talking to them, to actually get them involved. And they would have a whole year to come up with a poster design and present it to us. And it's a way for, what? What are you going to say?
Don't just
Huh?
continue, just
I'm
keep
here.
going.
Listen, this is all for a good cause. It's for the education of our children, and to get them involved with the trustees, and to, have them know who we are. So I'd like to go ahead with that concept and work it out a little more, get a little more detailed and organized about it. But I just started with Pearson calling, and I didn't want to go forward with other schools until I discussed the poster idea with you. So I'd like to present that as something when we do visit the schools. Do I hear everybody saying, yes, it's great?
Yep.
No, I hate it?
I would just consider like you said, the size, how many schools, how many classes, I mean, this can get out of hand.
Grade level.
No, I know, but well, maybe just the elementary school, we'll see, because the kids' artwork is so cute. But I think everybody should be involved, so I'll have to, I'm happy to talk to you about it, if you'd like to tell me what your thoughts are and get your input. This is a group effort for this
I think it sounds good, but you need to work on some details.
Yes, but I wanted to first get the thought out there and see what you thought about it before I, took it on, because it is a project. It's a big project. Okay, so posters, and then I already mentioned the October 3rd with the middle school, the oyster seating, which is wonderful and terrific, gets them involved, and there was something else on, as long as we're here, education, the biggest clam contest, I don't know which camera's on, I think it's over here, but our largest chowder and clam contest will be the 29th annual largest clam contest, October 5th. October 13th. No, 13th, excuse me. I'm reading the dates of digging. October 13th.
Okay.
And it's from 12 noon to 3 p.m. And we'll all be there, right?
Yep.
This year, we're going to have a special, our office will be open and designed differently to show the history, items from Susan Vorpal. You're going to bring in some things to show your father's involvement. Yes?
If I can, I mean, I don't know how much stuff I have.
Well,
But you had all of it.
I have all of his records, yeah.
So what are we gonna do?
I don't have
Play tapes of past
Am I gonna
conversations?
take pictures of his records?
no, but,
I mean, I have pictures of his fishing career.
Yeah, or how about, just item, like
photographed and filmed.
Well, we had, Jim and I and you had discussed about it, whatever you have, to show the history and the fisheries, and so we're going to line the office with tables, we'll have tents outside. All of us need to, and I have a list of the items from last year that Lori had made up of items that, places that donated last year for prizes, so I can send that out to everybody in an email.
Yeah, this is coming quickly.
Yes, real fast, so.
You're going to have to do some whip cracking on this, I think.
I'm good at that. So far, I think we've been working, we have tables coming, extra tables from you, we've got the picnic tables already there. We
What's
are,
going on with the walkway? Is that gonna be done beforehand?
Supposed to be done 2 weeks ago.
Okay, maybe if
I'll
we
find
could reach
out.
out and find out, 'cause if not, let's take that plywood.
That's all right. Yeah, I thought it was
Still
kayak
grass
racks.
by now?
On the front
That's
lawn.
supposed to be a temporary walkway.
Okay. We also, I've placed the information with WLNG for them to start doing the community events, and Lori is handling the advertisement. We have these hard copy, I took a bunch, if everybody would take at least two, and
Well,
put
we
them
already-
someplace in our neighborhood. You did Montauk?
No, Arlene
Arlene did
dropped a
Montauk.
bunch off to me, we put one up at our place, and I'll distribute some
I
others.
can
Okay.
take a couple tonight, too.
Okay, they're right here. I took probably 15 of them. I'm just going to go around everywhere I can, and to the seafood shop and Stewart's and, delis, places that people would, yep, Gosman's, okay.
Are you going to hit Springs General Store?
I'm going everywhere.
Okay. I can go
yeah.
there. I can go there on the Marina. I'll do those two.
Oh, okay, all right, so I'll just pass these around to you right now so you don't forget. All right, that would be swell. Thank you very much.
Keep dropping off at Ira Barocas.
Well, I can use another one, too, for Fremont.
Okay.
Be a supporter.
All right, and I have a ton of them at home, so maybe I have too many, but I can bring some more back in. And you're going to get a bigger,
Yeah, what are you getting?
bigger
I'll get the.
scale,
Don't worry about it.
right, Jim?
On a
Are
Sunday.
you getting us a bigger scale?
What's that?
Why do you need a bigger scale?
Because Jim measured it,
You
and
need a scale.
we need a real one.
It measures just measures the weights, like down to
Digital.
a digital small
There
scale.
is
So-
a digital scale.
Well, we pulled it out, and Jim took a look at it, and he thought it was a little tiny.
Pennsylvania, like certified.
That's what I thought it'd be like going to the butcher.
And we need some, we have judges for the clam chowder. I have the judges for the clam chowder. This year I got a chef. Danielle, yes.
No, I bought it.
Danielle Futterman's dad is going to be our chef. He's a private chef, and
Calibrate the scale and make sure it's working.
Test it out.
I don't care if you don't use it, I'm just saying,
No, I
it's
don't
brand
wanna
new,
piss
it
you off.
hasn't been used
I don't
yet.
want to piss you off.
we need some judges for the clam. Gentlemen, we need some judges for the clam. John, you did the measurements last year?
I think John's a perfect judge.
Well,
Shellfish
I'll
cake.
be one of them, but
I know, we need more than
another.
one. And we have Joe Potter and Stephen Tukolsky for music. They're coming to participate this year.
Good.
And I think that's about it, but we should probably have another meeting beforehand, just to, are we doing the duck race?
We are. Do duck race, we're gonna either do.
Potato sack bag?
We're either gonna do digging clams, or we're gonna do panning for gold.
Panning for, okay, all right, because I did find on the internet rubber duck
So much of that
racing,
phonic.
a video of
I
it.
got it.
I got to see what it looked
I
like.
got it.
Are adults allowed to play too?
What about oyster pearls?
It's funny you should say that, and I looked into that. It was just too much of a friggin' pain in the ass, and it got too expensive too fast.
Gold's cheaper.
No, you just, you do a little thing where the kids can basically treasure hunt.
This is gonna be fun.
Yes.
It will be fun. It will be a lot of fun, and I think
We
people
only
are,
have 3 hours, remember?
Yeah, no, this is, can I tell you what, in the past clam things, is there's not anything for like the little kids to do. And what happens is they get all distracted, they're running around, and the parents get sick of the kids running around, they leave. So this way, we'll have a little something for them to do. We're gonna set up a little duck race track, a little pump, circulating the
these
pumps.
Live ducks or
Yes,
rubber
of
ducks?
course they're live ducks.
oh, no, they are not. I'm getting clam shells, we're gonna paint clam shells, and
Okay.
poster paint
But you-
from,
We'll get some soap. and
Stewart's?
Little bars of soap, too.
Don't forget, the chapter
use
has to
of-
be distributed,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot
I
of
gotta tell
other
you,
stuff
there's not a lot
too.
of competition. I was looking at something that kids could just be doing.
Kids love to paint.
And you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna give away a bunch of those plastic beads that you bought for St. Patty's Day.
I hope the camera's getting the look. Oh, speaking of balloons, which I know is your favorite topic.
We're not
Yes, but I want to tell you, because I just got an invitation today, Steve Ballone is going to actually sign legislation on Friday. And I was invited to attend, so I have invited Surfrider. They're going to come.
Coffee?
I don't know, but it's at Up Island at Yaphank. And so they've asked me to bring the balloon picture and wear the balloon T-shirts. So if any one of you would like to come, we have to be there at 11:30, and he's going to sign the legislation, and right after he does, balloons are let go.
Good enough.
No, but seriously, if anyone would like to go, I would welcome the trustees to come.
My
Since
toenails.
it began right here. Excuse
That's on
me?
Friday?
Friday, Yaphank, 11:30. So,
Great job, keeps getting in the way.
well, so you know where to reach me if you'd like to go.
Okay,
And I'll be happy to drive.
all right. 3 Mile Harbor.
Thank you.
Application of the town of East Hampton to replace bulkhead at the town dock located at 3 Mile Harbor, Hart Creek Road. Anything new, John?
Yeah, these are the plans and the survey, if you want to look through them. Basically, the area, the east side of the bulkhead, the area along 3 Mile Harbor Road is going to be replaced. And our concern was the road drains. There was no retrofitting planned in this project. And I spoke to Kim Shaw about it. She got a meeting together with some people from Department of Public Works, the county, and Jim Bennett from Harbors and Docks, and Melissa Winslow and Kim and I met down there a few days ago. Kicked around some ideas. The idea initially was, well, what happens is there's a road drain on either side of 3 Mile Harbor Road. Connected under the road. It goes to a catch basin in the grass, and then it drains into the harbor through the pipe.
Yeah, I see the drain still.
This project only proposes to replace the last 8 feet of pipe as it goes through the bulkhead and leave everything else as is. Our thought was initially maybe there can be some retrofitting of the catch basins with filtration systems that are sold commercially to filter the water before it goes through the bulkhead.
That one's clogged, I think.
And
Yes, yeah.
as a result of this meeting, though, the thing is, the county is going to redo 3 Mile Harbor Road. The work's going to begin in 2022. The county would, as a matter of course in that project, deal with those road drains, and that this could be incorporated into that job. However, that's 2 or 3 years away. The Natural Resources has a project that's been funded to create rain gardens in that grassy area between the road and the bulkhead. So another idea, and this is kind of the idea that I'd recommend, is leave the catch basins in place, have them cleaned out really well by highway department so they're working the way they're supposed to be working as new. And then when the rain gardens are installed, hook in the drainage system to the rain gardens. So in effect, the rain garden becomes the filtration method for the road runoff.
Basically what you see on Town Pond right now.
Something like that, right.
So
That could be done, that would,
You're rerouting the last 8 feet of the pipe to go through the garden?
I'm not sure how it's going to be designed. The rain gardens are in the process of being designed now by Nelson, Pope, and Voorhees. That addition can be plugged into their design. So how that's designed will be up to them.
John, what they can do is they can take that outfall pipe that they're replacing as part of this bulkhead repair and set that up on more like a standpipe system, because what you're not going to want there is you're not going to want a situation where when the rain garden gets overrun, it basically sheets across the bulkhead and
Yeah, there'll have
spills
to be
over the
an
bulkhead.
there'll have
So what they can do is they can take those drain inlets, turn them into standpipes, and basically let them be an overflow on the rain garden.
What is a standpipe?
That would be part of the plan. Just if the rain garden fills up, where's the water go?
Right.
So there's some kind of a method to redirect it back into the drain pipe that goes through the
Right,
bulkhead.
but when you say a standpipe, it's a circular, cylindrical,
Well,
and
it's
it
just
sticks
going to
out
be.
of the ground?
Well, it's
Is
not.
it like an irrigation thing that would come
No,
up?
it's going to be like an overflow. So once that rain garden basically reaches its maximum capacity, rather than it expand beyond the metes and bounds of the rain garden, it'll spill into the pipe and go into the harbor in the same
Oh,
way
but it is at
that
the
it does
ground
right
level?
now.
It's at the ground level?
But on a normal rainfall, hopefully this water gets treated to a certain degree by the rain garden before it finds its way into 3 Mile Harbor. And hopefully the county, when they redo the road, they'll be intercepting that water farther up in the system where there'll be less water at the bottom here to basically feed this rain garden.
So the consultants will have to determine all the particulars. Flow rate is one important thing. They'll have to determine flow rate through the road drains, coordinate that with the county to make sure they're on the same page, and design that into the rain garden system. So I spoke to Stephen Lynch today. He's willing to clean out the rings in the interim. And Kim is going to put this into the consultants to add this to their design. So if everybody's agreeable to that concept for dealing with water coming through the bulkhead, then I'd like to make a motion that we
Approve this.
give a permit to the town.
I'll second that.
Aye.
All in favor?
Okay.
Very good work. A lot of different,
A lot of ins, a lot of outs.
yeah, good.
All right. We're getting close here. Payment of the bills. Ready Refresh, 5531, East Hampton Marina, $11,722.71. That's for the new engine installation and new engine and installation of the engine on the 3 Mile Harbor boat. Staples, $108.46. Montauk Printing, $70.61. We have a workers' compensation deductible to pay for $1,000. And New York State Insurance Fund, $154.34.
I'd like to make a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
All in favor?
Third, fourth.
Whatever.
All right, we have the minutes of August 26th.
I read them and I okayed them 2 weeks ago. If anybody else has had time to read them, who wanted to.
No, they're fine. Good.
So,
Do I have a motion?
Approve.
motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And financial report for the month ended August 31st.
I think we've had long enough to take a look at it. I'll make a motion that we accept the financial report.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Anybody have anything else?
I have one other thing.
Okay.
I got a call from Richard Lester about a week ago, and luckily he called me again and reminded me about this because I totally forgot it. There's a rock dedicated to Tom Lester at the launching ramp at Napeag,
Yeah.
which is the erosion that's taking place has apparently placed the rock, which was up at the dune, now sort of out on the beach. It's kind of in the way of a lot of activity. Richard is suggesting that we move that rock or have that rock moved over to either Northwest Creek or 3 Mile Harbor where Tom Lester actually fished out of. He didn't fish out of Napeag Harbor. And personally, I think that's a good idea
How
because
big's the rock?
Pretty big.
it's pretty big.
All right.
I mean, I think Highway could move
You
it.
got it. No, you know what, if you want, give me a yell, let me know where you want it. We'll move it. I'll do it with straps. We don't scratch the shit out of the rock.
Okay. I think one thing we need to decide is where we think it should go.
Yeah, I think we're gonna, I think it was dedicated and stuff like that, the launching ramp out there. We should do some homework on it first, but Tom had nothing to do with Northwest Harbor, he was a
Where do you
Northwest Creek. I think Northwest Creek someplace. We could put it.
I think one of the problems with Northwest Creek is who owns what land there.
Because it's Suffolk County.
What's town.
Yeah.
If we put it on county land, we have to
Just
make
keep
sure.
it from
Being
flowing,
sorted out.
keep it from flowing into the water.
I know Rick and Steve did a hike through there yesterday
Okay.
afternoon.
Well, we'll have more information on that, Joe, in the near future. You know, we do have beaches on Northwest Harbor that are a consideration. And there is town property, you know, up by Maidstone that could be a consideration too. That's a nice area with a lot of public access.
It's true. I thought the commercial dock maybe in 3 Mile Harbor.
That'd be a nice place for
That's
it.
kind of,
Pretty appropriate.
Is that where he fished?
they did fish out of, they did have traps in 3 Mile Harbor. They had most of their activity took place over in Northwest Creek. I mean, Brad Lowen fished with them, so
Yeah, we should.
I could touch base
should
with
touch
Brad
base
and
with
see what
Brad.
he might recommend. I mean, they're family, so his input might be critical.
I think it'd be nice to consult family members. Get a feeling of where they would like to visit. and see.
All right, and the only thing I have is, in your folders is a copy of our auditor's report. Just take a look at it. And when we come back, we'll make a motion to approve it or not. Anybody else?
Very in-depth.
Have a motion?
Motion to close the meeting.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.